format for? I'm thinking of just. I'll tell you about it in a minute.
Okay. Greetings, Groovers. Welcome to Full Record Jacket, the program that's so professionally produced you're just going to be blown away. I might redo that intro. Greetings, music fans. How you doing? Welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Ben, and we got a full jacket of records for you today because we're talking about the 90s, but not, well, the 90s and the 2000s, really. But it's not the albums thing.
No, we're not doing the albums thing.
It's not one-hit wonders, because
no, thankfully not.
These two bands are definitely not one-hit wonders. They are multiple hit wonders. We're talking about Blur and Oasis.
I'm talking about having some Botox done, dude.
Yeah, I thought of that as well when I saw myself lit by, it's recording.
Look at that. If I just have this pulled a bit, it wipes the years off me.
It's recording in the daytime is the thing, isn't it? It looks just quite horrifying what the extent to which we're falling apart. But
you just got to roll with it, I suppose, Phil.
You've got to roll with it. There's no distance left to run.
Yeah,
you get tender in your old age, don't you?
You do. It's all part of the master plan, isn't it? Which wasn't a single. Oh no, I've let it down. Yeah, we're talking. Look back in anger over your life, Phil. You just,
Absolutely. Or
Some might say that we are the most handsome people that ever walked the planet.
Or some might say that there's a charmless man or two on this show, but I
read it in the Hindu Times last night.
I've gone blank on it. Sorry, you've won, I think. Yeah, we're talking about Blur and Oasis. Now, remember back in 1995, there was that big hyped-up media battle to get to number one. Well, we thought we'd talk about not the albums, but the singles of Blur and Oasis from their careers, and not just the big, 90s ones that everybody knows, but maybe the ones that have been forgotten as well. And we were going to put them all into a big knockout.
Melting pot.
Now, I went on Spotify and I looked up, because people had already done work for me. They'd made a list. Someone had made a list of all the Oasis singles, the A-sides, and someone had done one of all the Blur A-sides. So when I put them all together, and I took off one or two which I think were not UK singles, and it came to
Don't Go Away.
Morning Glory by Oasis. Wasn't that a single somewhere?
No, so it was in Australia because I've got the Australian import.
That's it. So took that off, and then it came to 64. Now Blur have more. Blur have more. I can't remember what the split was now, but there's obviously they had a few more singles, but 64 in total. We could just shove
physical releases. Are we going?
I think so. I think they are. We'll have to double check the number, but we could just shove 64 A-side songs into a big random draw, and it'll be just like the FA Cup. You never know which big thing you're going to come up against early on, or whatever. Do you think that could be fun?
Yeah, I think it could also be quite hard as well, because obviously everybody's going to think, oh, well, Ben's just going to sit on the Oasis fence. Well, I'm not, because I did actually listen to the playlist yesterday, and I'm not going to lie, Blur have released some very good singles. They've also released some absolute rubbish, but things like the Universal, Tender, Coffee and TV, Song 2, There's No Other Way, The Narcissist. The Narcissist is probably my favourite Blur single, and that came out last year.
Interesting that that's your favourite ever already, yeah?
Could well be, anyway. I'm putting it up there, but I do love like the Universal and, so... What other stuff was there? A Charmless Man? I don't read it. I'm not a massive fan of Charmless Man or Country House, because I just think it's a little bit too... He needs up for brand, and he's up for brand.
No,
I'm a cockney, I'm a bloody cockney.
I did have a listen to the playlist, and I must admit I played more of the Blur ones because I haven't heard them as much.
Yeah.
And I reminded me that Tender, No Distance Left to Run. There's some really good songs there, aren't there?
Yeah,
And there's also one or two from The Great Escape that I'd forgotten about. Not Country House or the Universal. What's the other one? That was. There's another one. There's another one from that album that I thought was good. A great guitar on it. I can't think what it was now. It's one that you never hear anymore on the radio. Well, I don't think you do anyway. Charmless Man was a bit of a radio hit, wasn't it?
Yes, it
Don't
was.
mind that.
Yeah.
Don't mind that. I mean, it's good.
I
I
don't like the charmless man.
wouldn't be at my top of my list, but and I'd forgotten how good She's So High and There's No Other Way.
Stereotypes. That was
That's
the
it. That's good. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think. I'd forgotten
stereotypes.
it.
There must be more to life.
I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
There's a few that I'd forgotten actually, and then of course since Oasis split, there have obviously been more Blur singles and things like "There's Too Many of Us." That was a good one, I thought.
Yeah.
And as you say, I mean the most recent album is highly acclaimed as well. So I don't know whether we should have a cut-off point and say, "Oh, we'll only have the stuff when they were competing with each other." But that
the 90s?
But that then narrows it down to sort of 94 through to 2009,
Or
doesn't it?
why don't we just do from the start of Blur
Yeah.
to the end of the 90s? Would Oasis have released more singles up until 1999, 2000?
Possibly. But then that
We'd have to work it out.
But then that shuts off a lot of...
Supersonic would be up against the first Blur single, so obviously Supersonic's going to win. And then, we'll work it out. We'll work it out anyway.
I looked at that list and thought if we did it that way, but I reckon that Oasis might win the Battle of the 90s, and then I think it might be more interesting to chuck stuff from the 2000s in there as well.
Yeah, well, we could go up to the point that Oasis split.
Yeah, or we could just say, well, these are all the 64 songs, and because Blur have got a few more songs in there, that's okay because they've got a disadvantage because you love Oasis so much, so they had an advantage having a few songs in there more. But if we do a random draw, you could pull out a Blur song, and then there'd be another Blur song, so we have to face them off against each other. So the band could come up against itself as well as the other band. So it's really the songs. We're just going through all of the songs to find which one we think is going to win.
And are we going to have a battle off, or will it be whoever's got the most at the end of the pot, taking into consideration if Blur have got 10 singles more than Oasis, so then 5 would be eliminated. So Oasis would start off with a 5 handicap.
That gets complicated, doesn't it? I mean, are we trying to find out which band wins overall, or are we trying to find a winning single?
We are trying. Well, we can try and find a winning single, but I think we need to settle the Battle of Britpop once and for all. Right here, right now, I've got a bit of sticker stuck to my finger. Look at that. I don't know where that's even come from, out of my pocket. I think it's on my Playmobil Knight Rider car and I was putting the stickers on. But right here, right now, this is history, Phil. We are going to end the Britpop battle.
We're going to get the definitive answer to this question, because there was all those... Back in 95, there was all that controversy about some of the barcodes didn't scan on the Oasis singles, didn't they? And all this
Blur released 2 different versions, didn't they?
All the excuses. It's a bit like football, isn't it? When one side doesn't win, and they say, "Oh, well, the referee was, might have been bribed, or so and so was offside when they scored." But
anyway, as I always say, Blur may have won the battle, but Oasis won the war.
Yeah, I guess they did in terms of record sales. I haven't actually looked at what the sales are, but I presume Oasis did sell more records overall, did they?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
But you see,
there are some very good Blur tracks. There are. I do like Damon Albarn as a songwriter.
Now you see, in some ways, you might expect me to like Blur more I don't know, because I like things like the Beatles and stuff. You might think that, oh well, that's more a little bit more arty, a bit more creative. I like
Yeah.
some arty stuff. I like.
Challenging your massive cranium IQ.
I do like some stuff that's a bit out there, a bit more, a bit arty. But then I do enjoy mainstream stuff as well. So I think
I like
the
Taylor Swift.
well, the way I put it is Oasis. I think overall I've listened to Oasis more over the years, and I think that's just because I enjoy the Oasis sound. I respect Blur for their creativity a lot, and I
Yeah.
think they were very creative. But I find that I enjoy Oasis more, and I think maybe that's partly because I just like the sound. I just like the Oasis sound. I can't think of many
Yeah.
Oasis records where I don't like the sound. There are some Blur songs where I'm not so keen on the style of music that they're doing. I can say,
Yeah,
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 it's
I get that.
I
Sort
can
of that modern life is rubbish
yeah, that stuff.
period I'm not a massive fan of.
I can get some of Park Life. I do like Park Life, although and I get the creativity of it and the cleverness of it. But if it came down to it, would I rather listen to Park Life or Definitely
Morning.
Maybe?
Oh yeah, both 90 foot. Yeah, yeah.
I'd enjoy just cranking up Definitely Maybe probably more, but it's a different thing, isn't it? It's difficult to make the comparison. But I'll say,
Apples and pears, apples and oranges, isn't it? That's what it's like,
I'll,
trying to compare.
well, I'll tell you what. I was thinking about this. If I had to pick my favourite element of each band, with all respect for Noel Gallagher as a songwriter, and obviously without him, Oasis wouldn't have been what they were. But I think my favourite component to listen to in Oasis is probably Liam as a vocalist.
Yeah.
That he's probably my favourite thing about them. I've always liked him as a vocalist. I mean, obviously he's divisive, and some people will say I don't like him, but I think overall that's the big thing.
Not Gwiggs' bass playing.
Not dissing, not dissing any of them. They all contributed, and I do quite like the drumming by Alan White. I think I quite like his drumming on things like
Yeah.
Wonderwall, and of course, and I do like Noel, and I don't mind Noel's vocals. I do quite like Noel's vocals on songs, but Liam would be my favourite thing about the band. Now with Blur, it's a bit different because I do respect Damon. I think he's been very creative, and he's all these things he's done in his career. And I don't have a problem with him as the lead singer of Blur. I think he's he's got a great voice for their band, and he fits it very well. But he's not my personal favourite singer to listen to. So though I could listen to Blur and enjoy Blur, I don't have this thing of, I'd love to hear Damon's do some singing. You know what I mean? It's just, he's not up there for me. So for me, my favourite member of Blur is probably Graham Coxon, because I really like his guitar playing.
I do, and I like Graham Coxon's vocal on Coffee. I'm sure it's Graham Coxon on Coffee and TV, isn't it?
I think it is. Yes, I think so. So
And do you notice as well? I've just had a thought. At what point did bands start putting the at the start? Because you look at a lot of those '90s bands. You had Blur, Pulp, Elastica, Supergrass, Menswear, and then you got into the 2000s. You had the Strokes, the Bravery, the Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah.
Or are they just Arctic Monkeys? They're just Arctic Monkeys.
Some of them have. There's some bands for which this is it's almost. They sometimes have it and sometimes they don't. I've got an example of that. But I'll tell you what. I think this goes back to the '60s, doesn't it? Because in the '60s, and I'm trying to think of maybe in the '50s, there weren't so many bands in the '50s. It was more solo artists. But I'm trying to think of some of the bands that were around in the '50s, and it tended to be then, didn't it? Because you had like the Shadows and the Drifters, yeah.
And I suppose you had it in the '80s as well, because you had the Smiths.
Well, I was going to say
Stone Roses.
I was going to say this because I think the '60s was mainly about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, the Hollies.
And then you had Slade, Led Zeppelin.
The '70s seemed to lose
Mud.
a bit. Because in the '70s you could lose because what have we got?
The
No, that's the 80s.
Don't tell
But
Mark
no,
E. Smith that.
you could lose the. No, in the 70s, a lot of the bands didn't have the in front of them. As
The.
you say,
Yeah.
Black Sabbath, I know they started in the 60s.
Yeah.
Pink Floyd. Although I think you're feeling that maybe Pink
Yes.
Floyd at one time were known as the Pink Floyd. I may be wrong about that, but
Well,
tell me if I've
Facebook
got...
was known as the Facebook.
Yeah.
And if you put the at the start of bands that didn't have the, they just sound weird, like the Joy Division, the
Yeah.
Blur, the
Yeah.
Oasis.
Yes.
The
And then in the 80s, you see, the 80s, the came back because you have The Cure,
Yeah.
the Jesus and Mary chain.
Yeah.
Although I think maybe in the British bands tended to, the Smiths, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The
but
Stone Roses. Or
yeah,
are they Stone Roses?
well,
I'm
I
sure
think
they're.
people always talked
Are they
about them as the Stone Roses, didn't they? No, I never heard anyone say, "I'm going to see Stone Roses." It would be, "I'm getting the Stone Roses album."
Let's have a look. The Stone Roses. It is down here as the Stone Roses.
But the Americans tended to have Nothers, yeah. In the 80s, although the British bands...
Novas. Oh,
No.
I thought you were talking they were all going around in like GTEs.
The British bands had the in front of them mainly in the 80s.
Yeah.
The American bands tended not to. REM and Husker Du, whatever you want to call them. And
the REM.
although there was the replacements were. But so...
The Nirvana.
Yeah, so then in the 90s it came to be... There wasn't so much the in the 90s, was there?
No.
Certainly in Britain it wasn't. It was...
What a rabbit hole we have gone down.
Pulp, Elastica, or what's the band with Louise? Sleeper.
Lush.
Yeah, well, that was
Republica.
very much... That 90s era, it was very much about having a name without the in front
Cooler
of it.
Shaker.
Yeah, yeah.
You had the Manic Street Preachers.
Yeah. And then...
Maybe because they're from deepest, darkest Wales and the lack of using the in the 90s hadn't reached them by that point.
Now, which band is Chrissie Hynde the lead singer of?
Pretenders.
Yeah. Now, did you know that... I think I'm correct to say this. On all the Pretenders records, the word "the" doesn't appear. It's always listed as Pretenders, and yet everybody refers to them as the Pretenders. Oh, I was at Glastonbury and I saw the Pretenders. People don't say I was at Glastonbury and I saw Pretenders.
It does say on Wikipedia the Pretenders.
They've got them as the there. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure on most of the records, it's
yeah, it does. Look, it says Pretenders. That's
yeah,
their debut album.
I think that's the case on. I think that's been the case right through. I may be wrong about that, but yeah. So it's a weird one, isn't it? Because they never write it, but everybody says it.
Yeah,
that's the one I was thinking of as a.
Who would have thought those three letters could cause such, I mean, we have gone down a wormhole there from discussing Blur and Oasis singles to the use of the word "the." But I think if Blur were called The Blur, they wouldn't have been as successful.
No, of course, the Verve had to change their name, didn't they? They started as Verve, and they had to change it because of an American act that sued them. It was a jazz musician. It was Verve Records, wasn't it? It was a jazz label in America. So they actually had to change from no the to having a the.
The Bee Gees, or were they just Bee Gees?
I think if you look on some of their records, it probably just has Bee Gees, but everybody refers to them as the Bee Gees, don't they? I mean,
I'm just having a look behind me at some of my vast record collection. No Stereophonics. There's another one from the 90s, and Snow Patrol. There's obviously a big one from the 70s. The Who. Would they be late 60s? Or?
Well, they got really going in the 60s, didn't they? So, of course, there's this band around now. I don't know much about them. Some people say they're very good at pop, but it's the 1975.
Oh yes, yeah.
They've got a big the.
They have got a big the.
And there's also, isn't there, The National? It seems to be. Yeah. They're all American, aren't they? I think the ones I'm talking about.
But then you get some bands. I'm just having a look through some records I've got here. So I've got anything modern. No, I've got a Bastille album, but that's just Bastille. So the Supernaturals. There's another band from the 90s with the word the.
They had that in. Okay.
The Divine Comedy.
Yeah. Savio, what do you think? What's your take on this? Well, you can talk about the if you want to, but we were primarily supposed to be talking about
Blur and
Oasis and
Oasis
Blur.
singles.
How do
We
we
are
decide? We're definitely
Yeah.
doing singles only. We're not talking about albums or album tracks. We're talking about the singles, the A sides only.
And we're not including the B sides because it would be a no contest, wouldn't it?
Could be. So we're going to just talk about the A sides of these singles. How do we do this? Do we just do a total random draw? Have you got some clever way? Could you suggest some way that we do a cut off? Do we just say like the first 15 years of each band? Or do we do
maybe
it?
the first 15 or something? Because I think if we have Blur up against Blur and Oasis up against Oasis, we're never truly going to find it needs to be B versus O. So we may have to go through the list and remove some sort of obscure Blur ones, maybe that no one really gives us.
Well,
about.
maybe. So you could do that. So if you did a draw, let's say, and everything was first round was all the draws were Blur versus Oasis.
Yeah.
We would then have to decide who'd won each one. But then one band might win more than the other. You've then got an uneven number of songs. How do you do it then?
Or are we just going to total them up? So if I pull out Roll With It and it comes out against the Universal, the Universal's going to win. So that's 1-0 Blur.
Yeah.
And then if we pull out another one and it's Country House and it's up against Don't Look Back in Anger, Don't Look Back in Anger wins. So it's 1-1.
Yeah.
And we just smash them off.
Just do it that way. Then you have, and that's it.
Yeah.
You haven't really compared. You've just done a whole list of songs.
It's a war, isn't it? It's a war. It's whoever gets the most. First past the post.
Out of that first round. But after we've done that first round, surely we'd want to carry on knockout to see which
what
song
is the best single.
Which single wins.
Well, then it would be down to. Then it would be a battle off between Blur and Oasis. Blue on Blue.
But it's the winning single, isn't it? It's the ultimate way to do what they did in '95. So, instead of doing it with.
So we're doing two things here. Then
we're
going to find out who won the battle. By having the most, and then we'll find out who is the overall winner. So who wins the war?
Well, you see, it's much better than just putting Country House against Roll With It. We're throwing all the songs in there, and we'll see which one emerges victorious. I mean, that's got to be the ultimate winner, hasn't it? And obviously, if we decide it, then it's completely undisputed, and no one could ever possibly have any reason to question it.
I know exactly. I had Paul McCartney ring me up the other day just to ask my advice on what I thought was better, Rubber Soul or Revolver, and I told him, and he went away quite happy because we are the oracles. In fact, that doesn't work, but if you can see, I've got a halo. He did. So people should believe everything I say.
I'm sure he did.
He has a halo.
I'm sure if you told Paul you thought Phil Spector's production of The Long and Winding Road was the best one, he would accept that completely and change his view totally and just not have anything to say. Yeah?
1 second. Hello? Hi, right, Max. Yeah. Yeah, but no, I was just talking about you. Yeah, you wanted some advice. Yeah, no. Keep the bridge in, lose the middle eight. Yeah. No. He still debates whether the Beach Boys are better than the Beatles. Yeah, I know. I've told him. Yeah, he is. No, don't do that to him, because who will clean up the mess? Okay. No worries. Okay, yeah, bye. Yeah, he is, yeah. Okay, bye. Bye. Yep, bye. Come on, bye. Bye. Sorry about that, dude.
I'm trying to think of a pun on that. I can't think of one.
There you go.
Was that somebody famous on the phone or just one of your mates?
One of my mates. He does a bit of music. He's in a few bands, Paul.
Right.
Yeah. He used to be in a little band from Liverpool. So, yeah. What can I say, Phil? People just contact me out of the blue randomly.
I know, you don't switch your phone off during these shows. That's the problem, isn't it?
Unprofessional, and it's amazing, really, because not only did my phone was on silent, but it was also face down, and I still heard it ring. So that's the kind of level we're working at here, Phil.
Okay, so we're stuck now, viewers. We really need to know the best way to face off Blur and Oasis. Well, there must be something we've not thought of.
Yeah.
I'm sure our viewers will have a much better idea than us.
Yeah, if not, we'll just work it out as we go along, like we do with all these things, Phil.
We will. Okay. Like James Bond, Phil and Ben will return. Catch you then.
He's dead. He died at the end of the last one.